Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the CSFL kickoff show. Back for episode 2 of our rebranding. Of course, today is all about the NFC, and there's no one better in our league to run us through our NFC preview than the general manager of the Green Bay Packers, Zach. Zach, welcome back to the show. We completed the first half last time. Are you ready for the second half?
I'm ready. Ready to talk about the NFC, and hopefully this year the NFC can maybe bring a title back to this side.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. It's overdue a title. So let's see if, hopefully, in the absence of Rouse and the Saints, hopefully someone can step up and take it back this season. But yeah, without further ado, let's dive into your preview that you provided for the league and talk through the different divisions.
Yeah, when you look at the NFC, to me, I think it's going to be kind of a three-headed monster at the top. We'll kind of get into each team later on, but to me, it's going to come down to myself, Packers, and then you the Lions, and then I think the Panthers are going to be right there with us this year. So we'll see if someone else kind of steps up and takes that next step to being a title contender. But to me, it's kind of these three teams that are kind of the key to seeing who can break through this year.
Yeah, certainly. Not much change at the top, but let's dive into to each little division and just get your real rundown for the various, how the lay of the land is for each division, really. So we'll start at the top. Then we'll start at the National North. Do you want to just give us your breakdown for how you see this one playing out in each team?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bears and Vikings. I'll kind of start with them first. I think they're kind of they're making the right moves to go the right direction. I don't think anyone's going to argue that, but I think there's still a pretty wide gap between Bears, Vikings, and then our two teams at the top with the Packers and Lions. So I still think it's going to be Lions, Packers 1-2, and then we'll kind of see how the bottom end shakes out. But I think I like the Bears a little bit more than the Vikings, the way I see it.
Yeah, and it's certainly how you've laid it out on the preview here is that in terms of your division structure, you've got the Lions coming through as sort of staying on top really at 14-2, and then obviously the Packers just one game behind, and then obviously the Bears and the Vikings. As you said, let's start with the bottom of this division and then work our way up, I guess. The Vikings themselves, so fairly good off season again. But just a tough division. How do you see their season playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hit on it. I mean, I really like their draft pick, Matt Elam. I think it was pick 12. They got him. He looks like already one of the better strong safeties in the league. So that's going to be a big get. But other than that, they picked up Jimmy Graham. I mean, both of those are good players, but the talent gap is just so wide right now between them and the rest of the division. And so I don't think that being enough right away, but if they have a couple more off seasons, a couple more drafts like that, I think they'll inch their way up there. Right now, though, I mean, you look at points scored and points against, both bottom 10 in the league last year, so there's just so much to improve on. I think they have a pretty half decent roster, but it's just not really enough to challenge for anything more than 6-7 wins at the most.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair assessment of the Vikings. If we move on to the Bears, you said obviously that you see them being slightly above. I mean, they've had a really interesting offseason. They've lost quite a lot of elite talent, but they've also gained quite a lot of elite talent.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of how I see it. I mean, I think the talent they lost was kind of older talent, which I don't, they kind of need to go the young route anyway. So I don't think, looking forward long term, I don't think they're huge losses. But for the short term, you look at this season, when you lose someone like Urlacher and Lance Briggs, there's just huge hits. Luckily, they did bring in Calvin Johnson, which I think will be huge for this offense. And then, they had the third pick in the draft, and they got Telvin Smith, which should kind of help that linebacker group a little bit. But, and then on top of that, they also have a pretty tough schedule this year. So, I do like the way this team is going for sure, but again, when you look at the schedule and the kind of the lack of talent overall right now, it's still going to be a pretty tough year in Chicago.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and I agree. It's a very tough schedule for the Bears this year if they are to cause a bit of a mini upset and try and take this division. Really, you obviously got to play Green Bay, Detroit, the likes of Seattle in there, and San Francisco, Indianapolis. We've talked about in Tennessee as well. So some really tough opponents there. I mean, I agree. I mean, I was really. Well, really surprised that they managed to acquire Calvin Johnson, just because the amount of teams that were after him. But I mean, that for me, that was just the signing of the season in the whole of the CSFL was managing to get him on such a good contract in the long term. It's certainly going to help them on the offensive side.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised he went for, I think it was 12.5 or so, 12.5 million. That was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought someone would really kind of come in there and throw a big chunk of money at him. So I think that's if I'm Chicago, I'm really happy with that contract. And I think he's only 29 years old, so it's not like he's old by any means. So it should play out pretty well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then obviously we move on to the top of this division, which is for the past couple of seasons has been the top two and then the bottom two. Really, there's been this sort of gap and divide. You've got the Packers in here at number 2. I mean, I'll give you my observation, and we can get yours as the GM. But for me, I thought it was just a pretty much a status quo off season for the Packers. Not a lot of additions in terms of trying to bump up talent. Just a little bit of a restructuring in some of the transactions that the Packers have done. Which, I mean, for a team that was, team that was at 12-4 last year, I expect you to completely be around the same sort of position. You've not lost anything on defense or offense. Just some of the personnel may have changed in between. I mean, how do you assess your off season to have gone?
Yeah, I think the defense. I mean, if you look at defense first, I think it's going to be kind of a reshuffle. I don't know if I necessarily got better or worse or anything like that. I think once again, I'll probably rank kind of towards the back end of the top 10. A good defense, but not elite. I do think I like my offense a little more this year. I'll have Joe Thomas and then Anquan Bolden. I think those are going to be two huge pieces that may be a little better than what I lost. I think it's going to be hard to actually get there, but I think I have real potential to maybe have the number 1 offense in the CSFL. Obviously, it's easy to say that, but it's going to be harder to do it. But I think I have that kind of potential on offense, and I might need it when you see that what kind of players the Lions have on defense. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Bolden pickup for you is huge. Joe Thomas was an awesome pickup as well. I can certainly see the Packers being an elite offensive unit, and you're already an elite defensive unit, to be honest. So, yeah, tough. I mean, championship contenders is what I would have the Packers down as. I think they are probably the strongest overall roster in the league, in my opinion. But yeah, so we move on. You've obviously not got them as pegged as number 2. I'm guessing this is so you don't jinx yourself, to be honest with you. But you've obviously got the Lions here as just securing the top spot. But yeah, interested to get your take on the Lions, and just would comment on the schedule as well when we get there, because the Packers and the Lions have got to play each other within quite a short time period at the start of the season. It all could be decided by, I think, week 4.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, especially with the new game and everything. It's going to be interesting to see how the first few weeks play out. I don't think we're the only division like that. I think there's several divisions that have some. I think there's another one we'll hit on in NFC that has division games week 1 and 3. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that kind of plays out for a lot of teams. But yeah, when you look at the Lions, I think from an offense, they're kind of the opposite of the Packers, and that they have a good offense, a really good offense, but maybe not top 3, and then their defense is elite. So it's kind of a flip there. But when I look at us and the Packers, I think we have a chance to be top 3 offense, but the Lions, kind of the reason I like them a little more is they are probably almost a lock to be a top 3 defense, if not number 1. Obviously, I think it was 10.8 points you allowed last season, which ranked first. And then when you look at the acquisitions on defense, you obviously lost, who was it? Dockett, who retired, and then Mathis. But you got back Polamalu at strong safety and Lance Briggs. And then, the cornerbacks you drafted. And then you also got Marcus Trufant. So if anything, this defense could somehow find a way to be better this year, which is just crazy. But that's kind of why I like the Lions on top just a tad more as far as the season goes.
Yeah, no, interesting observation of the sort of the yin and yang of this division, where you've got the Lions with a defensive heavy ability. The Packers with more of an offensive heavy ability. It's going to be fun to see, how they get on. I mean, as we said, the first opening game of the season is Detroit Packers, and then week 3 is the reverse fixture. So depending on those 2 games, it's usually what swings this division. So by the time we get to week 4, this division could already have been swung in one of those teams' favour. And it's going to be fun to watch the opening start of the season in this division in particular. So let's make our way down. Obviously, we talk about the National North. Let's jump across to the National East then, and get your rundown for the 4 teams here.
Yeah, so this division kind of is the opposite of the NFC North in that there's no kind of split there between the top 2 and bottom 2. I think all 4 teams here, just kind of the way the division's a little bit weaker. I think all 4 teams, even though they all kind of have major weaknesses, I think it's impossible to say who could come out of this division as a winner. I think you can make a case for all 4 teams, even the Cowboys that I have ranked at the bottom, just because of how weak this division could be. I don't think it's out of this world as a possibility that the Cowboys could win it.
Yeah, we're just scrolling through your assessment here. I mean, you've got the Giants, interestingly, quite high ahead in terms of where you feel their record's going to be in comparison to the other 2. So maybe we start there. What's your observation of the Giants going into this season?
Yeah, I mean, I have 11 wins, which I think if you kind of glance at it, that's kind of a surprise considering they won 6 games last year. I think when you talk about the Giants, you have to start with their schedule. They ranked as the hardest schedule last year, and this year their strength of schedule is 32nd as the easiest. So you can't get any more of a kind of wide variance of schedules between years other than that. So I think you have to start there when you look at their increase in wins over last year. But this team is pretty good, though. I think they will make a jump. When you look at their offseason, it has to start with the impact of drafting Aaron Donald. I think he's going to be an impact player from day one. And then you pair that with, signing Reggie Wayne. Those are 2 really good gets for this team. I think they're going to play big. And when you look at this offense, I think it has, I don't know if it'll get there, but I think it has legit top 10 talent. I mean, Peyton Manning, or not Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, I think is, you could do a lot worse at quarterback than him. And then you're going to have Reggie Wayne and Hakeem Nicks at wide receiver. So I think those are going to be really good weapons on the outside. And, it's easy to forget, but this team also has Reggie Bush at running back, which I think he had over 16 or nearly 1,600 yards rushing last year. So I think this offense could be, one of the stronger in the NFC.
Yeah, fair assessment. I think what we're still expecting really is a step up in the Giants game this year, but also with the strength of schedule they've got to basically just take this division on those merits. We then move on to probably the Eagles next. I mean, you've got the Eagles and Washington pretty much neck and neck in sort of trying to take the second place in this division. But interested in the fact you've got the Eagles dropping, 1 game back from where they were last year. What's your assessment of this franchise and then direction of travel?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of hard to predict. I mean, I think a lot of teams in this division kind of fall in that where they could, be pretty good, but they have some major weaknesses that I'm just not really sure if they're going to be able to overcome. When you look at the Eagles, they ranked 25th against the pass last year. And then over the offseason, they lost cornerback Asante Samuel to retirement. And then they also didn't re-sign strong safety Nate Allen. So you look at a secondary that was not good to begin with, and you get those 2 losses. This could be one of the weaker secondaries in the league. So that's a really big worry for me. I think this offense will be okay, but I don't think they're good enough to overcome some of their defensive problems.
Yeah, no, fair. I really like their draft in picking up Ertz as well. I thought that was a nice pickup. Getting Dillman in free agency, I think, is a massive win for this team, increasing that line. And for me, personally, for this one, I'll be very interested to just sit there and see how Vic does in this new engine. Whether he, we know that he was not really as effective in last season's engine as maybe this new one with the running game. So I'm going to be really interested to see how he performs and whether the Eagles can get the most out of him this year. I think that will make or break whether the Eagles secure a wild card slot or a playoff slot versus not making the playoffs again this year. So if we move on to Washington, obviously the other team you've got pegged as sort of being in tough competition with the Eagles for that sort of second place in the division. A bit of a surprise package team last year. Had a fantastic offseason the year before this year in picking up Pryor. Direction of travel has been solid. What's your take on Washington? They were a playoff team, last year in the wild card slot. How do you feel their off season's gone, and how do you feel they're going to look this year?
Yeah, I mean, they might end up with maybe the best defense in the division, which isn't saying much because I think all the other three teams have some major question marks. I don't love this defense, but when you look at, I think they'll have John Beeson for a whole year now. They already have Dante Mock at linebacker. This is probably one of maybe the best linebacker group in the league. I think they'll be pretty average defensively, but offense, when you look at Terrell Pryor, I think is a good young quarterback, but he really just doesn't have anyone to throw to. Their top weapons are Ruben Randall, which I think probably 80% of the teams in the league he probably doesn't even start. So I think that's kind of the area of weakness for this team is if, even though Pryor is not a bad option, kind of when you look at the talent around him on offense, I just don't. They ranked 30th in points last year. I don't see that improving too much this season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm really interested to see how they line up on defense with only having two cornerbacks. Whether they move some of the free safety guys into cornerback positions in certain setups is going to be interesting to see how that looks. But yeah, no, I agree with your assessment. I think Pryor they've got the quarterback that they need now. It's a case of getting him some of the weapons to move up that rankings from 30th last year. If they can get that back up to sort of middle of the pack, I could see them taking this division quite comfortably, to be perfectly honest with you. If the Giants don't get their strategy in order this year, just shows how wide open this division is really. And then we get to the final team, which is the Dallas Cowboys. Gone through a GM change this offseason. You've got them pegged down the bottom here. Some really huge noticeable departures. Is there anything else you're seeing from the Cowboys?
No, I mean, I think it's, I kind of mentioned it in the preview, but I pegged it as kind of a transition year for Dallas. Obviously, you can see the players right there. When you lose Dominican Sue, Julius Peppers, DeMarcus Ware, Rondé Barber, I mean, that's a lot of players on one side of the ball to lose, especially for a defense that wasn't all that great last year either. And then when you add a new GM, I think it's just going to be, they didn't really do much in the draft because of the front office changes and new GM and everything. So, it's kind of hard to see this team making too much of a run this year. But of course, as mentioned, this division is wide open, so I think anything's possible for them. But I think next year when we kind of look at this, it's going to be, really a totally different picture with the draft picks and cap space they have on the horizon.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Holding pattern is what I would describe the Cowboys as at the moment this season. New GM, not necessarily had the chance to make his moves that he wants to make on this team yet. Still figuring out bits of the league. As we saw with the Bears earlier, Zach, if a GM comes in, sits patiently, works it through, and they can have a really effective offseason and close the gap or move back up into the playoff picture quite quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're. I mean, I think they could maybe be the front runner next year when we look at it, just because how open it is and the cap space they have. They could really surprise some people next season.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. So moving on to the National South, a bit of an interesting observation you've got here in terms of the Saints have dominated this division since the CSFL began. Obviously, GM has left. New GM from Dallas has come over. It's going to be a very interesting division this year. What's your take on? Do you feel the Saints are still on top? You've got the Panthers knocking at the door. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I have the Saints dropping 4 games. I'll kind of get into them a little bit later. I think they're really probably the hardest team to predict for a number of reasons. I like the Buccaneers. I think they'll kind of be around that 500 record. But I think this is a Panthers division when we can kind of look at them to start. But when you look at those acquisitions, this team was good last year. But when you add someone like Urlacher and Wilfork, those are really going to help take this defense from one that was solid last year, ranked 16th in points against, to I think a legit top 10 defense, and maybe even better than that. So, and then the other part of that is their schedule. I think they have a very easy schedule. So I think they'll get to that 12-13 win mark this year, the way I see it. It's kind of hard to predict when a team makes this many changes. You kind of have to see it first, but I think they'll be good this year.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the defensive ranks down here, you've got. I mean, this is probably the highest graded defense you've given in your previews to any team in the CSFL. So, not surprising that the Panthers, you're expecting them to make that step on defense. The lowest grade they've got here is an A-. So that kind of tells everything. Interested to get your view very quickly on the Panthers for two things, really. One is that wide receiver grade that you've noted down as being pretty atrocious with the O-line. Is that what's going to hinder the Panthers back? And how much of this is the Panthers making that step forward versus, possibly the Saints dropping off in this division?
Yeah, both great questions. I was going to hit on the first one, the wide receiver grade. I think I try to account for, kind of how teams move guys around a little bit, but sometimes it's hard. You kind of miss some things. But I think when I kind of looked at the preview and kind of worked everything through, they have two tight ends. I'm blanking on the names of both of them. I think one's Gonzalez and then I forget the other name, but they're two elite tight ends. But they moved one to wide receiver. I don't think that really grade changes the evaluation of wide receiver a ton. I still think they're probably one of the bottom teams as far as total wide receiver talent right now. But it probably would bump it up a little bit from the FUC right there. But what I was going to get into, though, if you look at this team, I think the one weakness is their passing offense. Obviously, Cam Newton's a dynamic quarterback, and I think he's one of the he's not bad or the weakness by any means. But this passing offense was pretty average last year, and I just don't know if he has the weapons needed right now to kind of take this offense to the next level. I think this defense could take that jump, but I wouldn't be surprised if this offense maybe just hinders this team a little bit in the playoffs.
Yeah, and it is tight margins when you get to the playoffs, certainly. The tight end that they moved was Tony Gonzalez, the 38-year-old tight end. So interesting to see how he does at wide receiver for the Panthers this year, whether he helps paper over the cracks of a slight weakness that you've highlighted there. Move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that's been down the bottom of the CSFL since the league has started. You've got them above the Saints here, and I'm really interested to understand why you've seen them make that huge jump.
I mean, I think this offense could be pretty good. The QB and running back talent in Tampa Bay lacks a little bit. I mean, they're not bad by any means, but they're pretty average. But when you look at this, they may have the best offensive line in the league, right up there with the best of them. And they have good wide receiver talent around their quarterback and Brandon Marshall and Mike Williams. So even though the quarterback and running back doesn't jump off the page at you, their talent around them should make this unit overall pretty good. I mean, kind of back to the O-line for a second, they have probably the best offensive tackle in Jason Peters. And then when you pair him with the number 8 pick a couple years ago and Matt Khalil, and then on top of that, they have maybe, one of the league's best guards in Mike Pouncey. So, the point being, I really do like this offense. This defense is going to, they rank 29th in points again, so I think their talent is better than that. So I'm kind of curious to see if they play up to their talent. I think their defense could rank closer to average than they did last year. So I think this team could definitely be better, but we'll kind of see if they can kind of live up to their talent or not.
Yeah, it seems like a fair assessment. I'm really excited to see how this team does. In the sense that you said the O-line is incredible, but to see whether it helps improve the ability of their not elite running backs, really, whether the O-line is really important in this new engine is going to be fun to watch. I really like the two wide receivers they've got in Marshall and Williams as well, and I can certainly see why you've got the Buccaneers going from a 6-10 record to a 9-7 record. When you look at the actual matchups here, I can certainly see them beating some of these teams that they probably wouldn't have beaten last year, like the Steelers, Bengals, the Cowboys. the Vikings as well, and the Browns. I can certainly see those wins appearing this year that weren't there last year. We then move on to a team that I think everyone really wants to know your assessment of the Saints, a team that has been a Super Bowl champion, a CSFL champion, been arrived in the Super Bowl last year without a GM. This year you've got them being pegged down from that 12-4 record with an elite offense and a really good defense to being just above 0.500 team. So what's your take on the Saints this year from that huge drop off?
Yeah, I kind of hit it a little bit earlier, but this might be the hardest team to predict. There's just so many changes. Before I get into the GM change, you look at this roster, they still did lose, some big pieces from a team that won 12 games, including the offensive tackle, Goss, and then, they lost cornerback Tracy Porter and then Brian Dawkins at strong safety. So they did add Lamar Woodley, so that's a good add there. But I think top to bottom, this roster may have taken a slight step back. But then when you look at the GM, obviously, I don't need to say it, but I kind of understood that Rouse was pretty special of a GM as far as what he got out of his roster. So it's just so hard to say, this new GM is just going to come in and duplicate that. Not a knock on Regan or anything like that, but I think it's just going to be hard to predict what the new GM will do and kind of how they will kind of use this roster. And they still do have, maybe a pretty big question mark at quarterback. So that's to be seen how big of an impact that will be. I think they got Garoppolo in the first round, but he looks a little bit of a project. I think he's a pretty good pick. I'm not downing the pick, but I don't think he's going to come in day one and just make a huge impact.
No, and quarterback was always a challenging one for the Saints once Breeze retired anyway, and Rouse managed to find a way to achieve that. Completely agree that it's not a knock on Regan at all. It's a bit like trying to take over from Bill Belichick at the Patriots. Whoever takes that job on after he goes, my goodness me, you're always going to be compared to that guy, and no matter what you do, you're always going to be, well, you're not quite as good as Rouse. Rouse would have got this team into a Super Bowl or so on. So big shoes to fill. It's going to be very interesting to see how he does against that. The talent, I think, is still there, though, which I think is what you're saying. It's just a case of a bit of a transition in GM strategy, maybe, and seeing how that all plays out makes it very difficult to assess the Saints.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's, when you look at teams, they probably have the widest win margin of any team as far as I think their bottom and top is pretty wide. They're kind of hard to predict. So I wouldn't be surprised by really any outcome for this team. I wouldn't be surprised if they win the division, to be honest.
No, I think that is the range of scale, isn't it, that you're saying, is they could be a team that doesn't make the playoffs, and they could be a team that probably might win a Super Bowl. I mean, that is the gap with the Saints, and it's very difficult to rate where they are at this stage. We'll certainly see how that plays out. And then we've got the bottom team of this division here in the National South, the Atlanta Falcons. Couple of big name acquisitions, though, Zach. You still got them down the bottom, though.
Yeah, so when you look at their acquisitions, I don't rate, defensive tackle is probably the most important position. So that even though it's a huge get as far as talent, I don't know if, it's kind of the same with center. At center, I don't think is the most important position on the field by any means. So even though the player names and ratings, kind of jump out at you, I don't know if they factor in to, calculating, team success, projecting forward as much as other positions. So that's kind of one thing to note. And they also lost a lot, and Calvin Johnson is going to be a big loss, among Tom Brady and Lamar Houston and those other guys. So, honestly, if I kind of got to redo it, this projection, kind of redid, I might one of 15 is pretty rough. A lot of it goes into how they ranked last year. They ranked, bottom 5 in both offense and defense for points for and points against. And from what I can tell, this new GM, I think he'll be on top of things. I think he'll do really well. But as far as projecting, I really don't factor that in. When you look at a new GM, I kind of go in assuming not a lot. So, the sky's the limit for this new GM. I think he'll, definitely exceed expectations. But I don't really. It's kind of hard to predict. New GMs are really the hardest to predict by far. So it'll be interesting to see what he does.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's very much a fairly big loss, I think, losing Brady to retirement. It's now obviously Cousins' team, and seeing how Cousins does in a starting role is going to be a fun one to watch from a neutral perspective. I'm gonna throw a bold prediction here from my view, just against this. I can see the Falcons being above the Saints in this division this year. I could see I could just see it panning out through the season. This GM will make some tweaks and changes, might make some moves to bring them above. They won't make the playoffs. I don't think the Falcons will make the playoffs, but I think I could see them going above the Saints, which would be a bit of a shocker anyway. But yeah, an interesting division in the sense that, as you've outlined, I think Panthers are probably going to take this division. Buccaneers getting into the second place and taking going to the wild card would be fun to watch. And then who knows what's going to happen with the other two? Just too hard to tell at this stage. So we move on to our final division to look at in the NFC, and that is the National West. Cardinals have held this division for a period of time now. Prior to that, the Seattle Seahawks had it for a couple of seasons. You've still got the Cardinals being on top here, but give us your lay of the land for the National West.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to start with the Cardinals, we got another new GM, so another team that's kind of hard to predict for that very reason. I think the 49ers kind of undershot their talent a little bit last year, so I kind of have them down a little bit again this year based on last season, but I think they have from just a pure talent perspective, I think there's not a big gap between the Cardinals and 49ers. And then when you look at the bottom two teams, I still think there is a pretty big gap between the Seahawks and the Rams compared to the top two teams in my eyes.
Yeah, cool. No, I think that's a fair assessment, certainly. Let's take a little look then at the teams then. So you've obviously got the Cardinals still on top here. New GMs come in. Previous Cardinals GM worked wonders of the Cinderella story from a couple of seasons ago and getting to the Super Bowl and get going all the way. But what's your take of this Cardinals roster as it stands?
Yeah, I mean, I still like this team. Again, new GM, so we'll see. But from a roster standpoint, I like the team overall. When I looked at them last year, I think the Panthers and Cardinals are pretty similar. I think the Panthers have kind of taken the next step, and the Cardinals have kind of held steady. But really the story of this roster, though, is strengths and weaknesses. On the offensive side of the ball, they probably have the best wide receiver tandem in the league with Greg Jennings and Larry Fitzgerald. And then on the opposite side of the ball, they probably have the best cornerback tandem in the league with Mike Jenkins and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. And then kind of on the flip side, they could not stop the run at all last year, ranking 32nd in yards allowed. They don't have a very good linebacker unit, don't have good defensive tackle talent. They did pick defensive tackle Benny Logan at pick 123, which I think looks like a reach there, so I'm not really sure too much how he'll help out. But Matt Schaub put up big numbers last year. I think it wasn't so much his talent, but when he throw to these two wide receivers, that makes his job pretty easy. So this offense should once again put up some pretty big numbers in the air. I think really the story of their season is if they can actually make a real improvement in stopping the run. Because obviously, if you rank 32nd against the run, you're gonna have some issues, especially when you play better teams that can really expose that weakness.
Yeah. Business as usual. Be interested to see how the new GM adapts the strategy based on some of those things and some of those weaknesses from last year. So we move on to the 49ers, who you've got pegged as a second in the West, the NFC West here. You commented that they obviously had a pretty downward year last year based on the talent they've got. So do you see them having a more of an upward trajectory this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say until you see it, but I think this defense ranks. When we just look at skills that the players they have on their roster, I think they have a pretty good unit. Not great by any means, but better than a unit that ranked 22nd in points against. Again, on offense, I don't know if they're great by any means, but I think they have talent to maybe be closer to top 15. They have probably the best offensive line, or right up there with the best of them. They lost Ryan Matthews and then used the 8th pick in the draft to get Devontae Freeman. Could be seen as a little bit of a reach considering some of the running backs in round 3, but I think he's a good 3-down running back, so I think he'll play well behind this offensive line. I have them at 7-9, but it would not surprise me at all if they take the Cardinals, take over the Cardinals as a division leader.
Cool. Yeah, interesting observation there. Cardinals and 49ers might be neck and neck then in this division. Certainly the talent's been added to the 49ers, and we'll see how that plays out this year. We then go to sort of the third place in this division, which is the Seattle Seahawks on your projection. What's your assessment on this team? A couple of big losses there, in particular Earl Thomas, but a couple of nice little acquisitions through the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think Earl Thomas is going to be a big loss. But the story of this team is that their quarterback. I think there are three options. I really don't know who's going to start, but it's Kolb, Osweiler, and Skelton, which are pretty average backups for most teams. So I think that's just going to be such a big hurdle for this team to overcome this season. Maybe next offseason there's a good quarterback draft. I don't know, but going in, when you look at this season, it's just going to be hard to overcome that. I love this offensive line in Seattle. They drafted Orlando Franklin and Nate Soldier last draft, and on the outside is their tackles, and they're already one of the better tackle groups in the league already in their second season. And then to top it off, they have Clint Bowling as their guard, which is already one of the better guards in the league at 25 years old. So this offensive line not only is one of the better in the league, but they're also extremely young. So that's going to be a huge piece to build around going forward. But this defense ranked 30th in point or 21st in points last year, and then lost Earl Thomas. So it's hard to see that as a strength. And then when you factor the quarterback in, it's just hard to see too many wins in Seattle this year.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. It's going to be fun to see who they side with on the quarterback situation, as you said, because there are three guys there all pretty equal in talent. Who on earth they're going to put behind this elite offensive line? I just don't know. Who knows? Maybe if they have a slightly downward year this year, they manage to get a solid draft pick. Maybe a quarterback comes to light. We know, given that we use the trajectory of the usual NFL years with a bit of a mix, there are some really good quarterbacks still to come into this league. So maybe Seattle gets lucky and manages to grab one of them, and I think that would take them from being a 5-11 team to probably being like a 8-8, 9-7 kind of team is where I see them going, based on the talent that they've got so far and building through that young talent that's on good contracts. Yeah, and then we get to our final team on the NFC, final team in the National West as well, the LA Rams. I guess looks like they offense was the main issue last year. Do you still see that being the same issue this year, or is there something else that means this team is going to make a pretty big backward step from 6-10 to possibly a 3-13 record that's projected here?
Not a lot to say about Los Angeles. You can see right, on the screen, there's not a lot of changes as far as talent. They used the second pick to get Jarvis Jones. I think he'll be a good player. I'm not sure if he really changes the outlook on this season too much, just because that was really the only move they made. This offense didn't rank too well last year. The defense did rank 12th in points, but part of the reason for their decline in wins is projected is because of their schedule. You look at their schedule; they had some close wins last year. They beat San Francisco twice last year, which I don't see them repeating this year. And overall, their schedule is just quite a bit tougher. So I think that's kind of the big reason for their downward trend.
Yeah, no, schedule is a killer for them this year. I agree with that. Yeah, going to be interesting to see whether they can hold that step from 6-10 last year to keep that going, given the strength of schedule. That's going to be their biggest challenge. I'm really interested to see how Bradford does in this new engine as well, and whether they can utilize him a little bit more than they have done historically. He had quite a backward year last year. I mean, his target percentages were pretty good, but in terms of the raw metrics of yards, QB rating, he certainly took a downward spiral from where he was in sort of the second year when this team was developing a little bit more. So going to be fun to see the Rams. That kind of sums up our NFC division preview and the various areas. Let's just take it back up to the top here. and just bring us back up to the NFC playoff preview that you've got here. Is there anything you'd like to sort of say on this this preview? Obviously, you've very bold statement. You've got the Packers all the way through to be the Super Bowl champs, which you talked a little bit about last episode on the AFC one. But in terms of just the NFC specific, is there anything you want to call out here in terms of projections? Where you see this going?
Not too much. As kind of noted earlier, I think it's a three-headed monster. I think it's going to be Lions, Packers, Panthers. I think it's anyone's game. From pure talent, I think Lions are, I think you guys are going to kind of have the hardest team to beat. But, you catch you guys on the wrong day. I think our offense will kind of threaten your defense just enough maybe to pull an upset if Rodgers can pull some magic like he did last year in the regular season matchup where he drove down the last minute and scored a touchdown. So we'll see if some Rodgers magic can make a play here in the playoffs. I think, Panthers, I probably have pegged as the third best team. And then, when you look at if we do face each other, Lions, Packers, I think it's going to be a very good game. If I had to put money, I'd probably say you're the favorites to beat us, but I think anything can happen. I think for the sake of everyone, I'd put myself as a champion this year. Took one for the team. We'll see if I can win a championship and get my prediction correct all in 1 year. That'd be nice, but I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, I mean it's really tough up the top there. I'll certainly say that between the Lions, the Packers, and the Panthers. Certainly, in terms of talent, they're all pretty equal. They all have different elite strengths, I would say, that kind of come to play, and it's just whether one of those will just be enough to take the team forward. Certainly, the thing I always worry about with the Packers is whether Rodgers turns up or not, because as we saw last year, if Rodgers decides to turn up, basically there's no hope in hell. It doesn't matter what defense you have. If the guy can just, as you said last year, unfortunately you can't go back and watch replays in this engine at all from last year, but that last minute drive was fun to watch, but very frustrating at the time. I'll certainly say that. It's going to be close. It's going to be really tough. But yeah, as always, it's great to get your previews, and these articles are really fantastic for the CSFL. And if you are haven't looked at them yet before Thursday's regular season Sim 1 games are played, certainly go back and have a look at these, or check out the AFC preview that we did on the channel a few days ago. But Zach, they're fantastic. Thank you very much for taking the time out this week to just go through them. And is there anything else you want to say on the previews at all before we close off the segment and go into the regular season?
No, I think we covered it. Again, thanks for having me on. It's always fun to get on here and talk about these teams, and I think everyone's just ready for Thursday, and should be a lot of good division games week 1, so it should get started quickly here.
Yeah, I know. I certainly can't wait for week 1, and best of luck to every team this year. Who knows who'll come out and who'll grab that banner. Hopefully, I'm sorry, Josh, I'm hoping it's not the Titans again. We need a new winner at this point. Best of luck to everyone. Thank you very much for coming on, and we'll see what happens on Thursday and through the rest of the season.